Angry protests, hysterical columns, shrieking media personalities, dishonest magazine covers, all designed to turn voters against the president decisively and permanently. The immigration policies coming out of the White House made Trump like Hitler. They told you that again and again and again on the other channels. It was a month of nonstop drama, red-faced demagogues barking into TV cameras, progressive mobs threatening administration officials in restaurants. Things seemed to fall apart. What was the effect of all of this politically? Well, we now have a conclusive answer to that. In the first week of June, right before all this began, the president's approval rating, according to the Real Clear Politics average, was 42%. His disapproval rating was 54%. That's a spread of 12 points. After a full month of all the cable news morons calling him Hitler, Trump's approval rating rose to 43%. That's one of the highest of his presidency. And his disapproval dropped to 52%. That's a spread of 9 points, an improvement over the beginning of the month. But here's the remarkable part. In the Harvard-Harris poll, the president's approval rating rose 10 points among Hispanic voters. Keep in mind, this is over the exact same period when every single person with a master's degree in the continental United States was telling you that Trump hates Hispanics. And yet his number among Hispanic voters rose 10 points. Amazing. Could it be that the cable news dummies don't really understand the country they pretend to report on? Could it be that Hispanic Americans are pretty much like every other American, normal people who love their country and know that illegal immigration hurts all of us? It looks that way. That's bad news for Democrats who are betting that a campaign of hysteria and race baiting would move voters to the polls on their behalf in November. It hasn't worked. Will the left figure out that it hasn't worked? Maybe, but maybe not. They've grown so confident that Trump is finished, over, done, that they're no longer hiding what they really think. They pulled off the mask and they're telling you directly. Calls to halt family separation turned almost immediately into demands to end deportation itself, to abolish ICE, abolish profit, abolish prisons. The left believes that voters are so angry at Trump that they want to abolish the country that elected him and replace it with an entirely new country where borders and business, where the law itself all no longer exist. They're betting that most voters hate Trump so much that they've come to hate America too. That's their gamble. As of tonight, it is not paying off. Lily Gil-Valletta is CEO and co-founder of CN Plus, and she joins us tonight. Lily, thank you for coming on tonight.
Thank you, Tucker.
So this strikes me as an amazing number, that after this last month that we've had, where people on MSNBC and CNN were literally comparing Trump to Adolf Hitler himself repeatedly because of his immigration policy, his number goes up 10 points among Hispanic voters. How do you explain that?
Well, what I love about data is that it removes the bias that comes with opinion. I don't care if you're on the right or on the left. Data removes the emotion of people having just an assumption about our community. And I've said it over and over again here in this network and many others. We are not a single-minded community or a single-issue community, and we do care about jobs and the economy as the top priority as Hispanic Americans. And over again, data shows it from Pew Hispanic, or the data that you're showing, or our own data. I'm running big data analytics almost every month on the state and the voice of the people in this nation, and we keep seeing the same trend over and over again. So we can continue to hit the immigration piñata, as I like to call it, as an issue, but it's not the one that is really driving the priority of Hispanic Americans who are business owners, are working hard for the American dream, and ultimately moved by jobs and the economy.
What do you make of the assumption, and I think it's shared by pretty much every cable news anchor on the other channels, by most Democratic politicians, that if you have a Hispanic last name, you are for illegal immigration? That strikes me as a pretty patronizing, at best, a patronizing assumption.
It definitely is a patronizing assumption because, yes, while many of us who happen to be Hispanics or Americans in general may know somebody that is caught in the middle of a broken immigration system, more than 60% of Hispanic Americans are actually U.S. born. And that is a fact that many people just overlook. So we want to work hard and do things the right way. One of the fastest growing segments of small business owners happen to be Hispanics. And we just need to, again, go back to the core of the priority issues and not continue to feed the rhetoric of one single issue that, yes, needs fixing, but is not the top one. And once again, we're going to see it for the next round of elections. If this continues to be the message or trying to be the thing that gets rattled around, it will not work. And that is why President Trump has had the positive affinity that he's getting. And that's not my opinion. That's what the data shows.
Well, it is, though. I mean, I can't say this enough. It's the opposite of what I think every person I know in Washington would have predicted a month ago, that after all this drama, we've had the single most intense month politically I've ever seen in a life lived in Washington, that he would be more popular among Hispanic voters. Can you just focus on that point? What do you, to the extent we know, what do you think that's about?
So we actually run some data as recent as a few hours before this show, Tucker, where we looked at 200,000 data points. This is with Culture Intel, our big data analytics platform. And we looked at the voice of 200,000 Hispanic Americans in the U.S. And again, jobs and the economy is what driving the positive affinity towards President Trump. Immigration ranks as issue number 5. So there is a lot of noise around that. And people that care about that issue feel like that is the only issue. However, we are not a single-minded issue voter bloc or community. So again, it's diminishing the sophistication of this audience and the fact that we do care about growth, prosperity, and achieving that American dream, which people like me, I'm an immigrant myself, come here to work so hard for. And that is ultimately what we want to achieve, not just for us, but for all Americans.
And assumptions to the contrary diminish the people about whom they're made. You're absolutely right there. Lily, thank you for that. Super interesting.
Thank you, Tucker.
Well, it's pretty obvious there is a crisis on our southern border. Tens of thousands of people crossing illegally or arriving to demand asylum. Who is to blame for that crisis? Again and again, we have heard that we, American citizens, are to blame. Are we? Heather McDonald is a contributing editor at City Journal. She's author of the upcoming book called The Diversity Delusion, How Race and Gender Pandering Corrupt the University and Undermine Our Culture, and she joins us tonight. Heather, this is one of those assumptions that I think most people on the other side, on the open border side, take for granted. That if there's a crisis on the border, it's the fault of American citizens. Is it?
No, Tucker, it's a cardinal principle of the left that favored victim groups have no moral agency. Their behavior doesn't count. They're victims inevitably of structural racism. But the fact of the matter is that if you are facing a deportation risk, the person who's responsible for that risk is you, by having made the voluntary choice to come into this country illegally. Deportation is the universal response to illegal entry across the world. It's practiced without apology in countries south of the border. So the American people are not to blame for this. They are simply asking that the rule of law be enforced.
But what you hear when you make that point, and I think you're absolutely right, and I've made it, and the response you get is, well, the United States is such a poisonous force in the region that our foreign policy is responsible for the fact that people are fleeing El Salvador and Guatemala and Honduras. How would you respond to that?
It's preposterous. I would ask back in response, well then, if U.S. is so poisonous, if this is a country so riven by racism and misogyny, why do you want all of these people of color to come into it? The left knows in some part of its brain that, in fact, this is the most opportunity-filled, tolerant country on earth, which is why it wants to bring in as many third world people of color as possible here. But at the same time, it insists on this false narrative that we are engaging in lethal bias and discrimination.
What happens to people when you bring them into a country legally, let them stay illegally, give them asylum, any of those routes, and the second they get here, you tell them the country you've just moved to is an immoral place run by racists? How does that affect their view of their new home, would you say?
Well, and that is certainly the propaganda that they get in schools from kindergarten onwards. It results in assimilation downwards. We are seeing in the Hispanic community, yes, wonderful entrepreneurship, as your previous guest saw, but we also see significant assimilation into the underclass with gang involvement, dropping out of school, highest teen out-of-wedlock pregnancy rate in the country. And it doesn't help to be told that you're in a place that somehow oppresses you and to think of yourself as a victim.
No, I think that's exactly right. Heather McDonald, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tucker.
Across the country, more and more on the left are turning toward harassment and violence as a political tool. In Washington, a Secret Service officer was injured this past Saturday after he was attacked by a man following a pro-immigration rally. In the state of Nebraska, somebody smashed the window of a Republican office with a brick and then spray painted the phrase "Abolish ICE." Back in Washington, a lunatic teacher at the overpriced Sidwell Friends School, home of the children of many presidents, harassed EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt at a restaurant. And then today, this morning, went on MSNBC wearing a shirt that read, quote, "Your founding fathers owned slaves." In other words, this is a terrible country. This is someone who's teaching your kids, or not yours, but the kids of people in Washington who can afford to send their children there. Chadwick Moore is a journalist. He is a close observer of all of this, and he joins us now. Chadwick Moore is someone who was on the left fairly recently and now is not. Have you noticed, since you watch carefully, a progression where progressives are defending things, doing things they would not have a year ago?
Yeah, it seems that they are hankering for a civil war, and which would be very ill-advised considering we have all the guns, as well as the market on the world's most valuable resource, which is toxic masculinity. But the open calls for violence against Trump supporters, the open calls, we just had Michelle Wolf, I believe on her Netflix show, just said this is not a time to be civil. You should be going after these people. This open rhetoric of calling for violence is very interesting. And Michelle Wolf's an interesting character because comedy is a great bellwether for what's happening in society. And if you look at the great comedians, American comedians, they are famous and we know them because they allow us to laugh at ourselves. They allow us to laugh at each other. They speak universal truths in the most effective way possible, which is through humor. You don't have that anymore in comedy on the left. You have somebody like Michelle Wolf who basically spreads, she has hateful ideology, hateful rhetoric. She's not funny. And this is the same with all comedians on the left. They essentially, people aren't laughing because they're funny. They're laughing out of cruelty, not mirth. Because you can tell how emotionally damaged these people are basically by the results of the election. And they just want to hear the ideas espoused back to them. It's interesting that what could really come from this, I don't see how the Democratic Party really repairs itself after this, after Maxine Waters' comments, after all of this open violence. What you may see, and what might actually be the best thing for them, is for them to completely crash and burn, for them to just give up on 2020, maybe even 2024, in order to reinvent themselves. That's maybe when they become even more dangerous than they are now.
But is there some, look, if there was a Republican member of Congress who stood up and said, next time you see someone you disagree with, assemble a mob of people and go confront and harass that person. I'd like to think I would be honest enough to say, you know what, that's totally over the line. That's just wrong. You're not seeing that response to Maxine Waters from our own party. Are there any adults left in the leadership of the Democratic Party? And will they be standing up soon to calm what is clearly becoming out of control?
I don't see any leaders on the Democratic, on the side of any adults in the room. I don't, whoever does step up to do that and does go against the party, that might be the new face of the party, something they desperately need. But they are openly spreading this rhetoric. They are a wounded animal is most dangerous when it's injured. A wild animal is most dangerous when it's injured, and that's what you're seeing here. They are wounded and they're frightened and they're lashing out. I don't know.
So what is the effect on you? So you live, again, you were until pretty recently on the left. I think you live in a very liberal neighborhood. You come on Fox and give opinions that are not popular in your neighborhood. What's happened to your life?
I've been shouted out of public places before. I went on your show to talk about that once. Personal life, it's very difficult. Although I will say, I really can't go to many places. If I go to a bar or something without meeting someone who, after a stranger, after a conversation, I discovered that they are very much questioning leftism. They're very secretly, they know it's all kind of a load of bull. They know it doesn't make any sense. But of course, they're too frightened to stand up against the party. They're too frightened of what will happen to them personally. They will lose all of their friends. They may lose their jobs. They may lose family members if they speak up. I think a lot of people are just scared. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, of course they're scared. We're in the middle of some kind of cultural revolution. If we can just make it to the other side, all will be well. Chadwick Moore, good luck.
Thank you.
Many on the left are now demanding openly the Supreme Court be expanded and packed with liberals the next time Democrats come to power. That would guarantee a liberal majority in the court forever and ever. We'll talk to someone who is advocating that strategy next. Well, the left is taking Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy's retirement hard, so hard, in fact, that some of them want to throw out the entire constitutional order and delegitimize the Supreme Court itself. Ian Samuel is a lecturer at Harvard Law School. He's been demanding that as soon as Democrats hold power once again, they need to expand the size of the Supreme Court and pack it with liberals. A week ago, Samuel tweeted this, quote, "Pack the courts" should be a phrase on par with abolish ICE. Ian Samuel joins us tonight. Ian, thank you for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. Welcome from Paris.
Oh, of course. Wouldn't it just be easier to give California, I don't know, 27 new congressional districts in LA County and be done with it? Or maybe just abolish Congress entirely? I mean, if the goal is just to increase the power of the left, why mess around with the Supreme Court?
Well, you know, the thing is, I think we very much agree on the basic end here, which is that the Supreme Court should not be a partisan institution subject to sort of like ideological swings. The problem is the Supreme Court, the justices of the Supreme Court, 14 out of the last 18 have been appointed by Republican presidents. They had sort of 11 in a row before Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which is kind of a surprising and almost remarkable achievement when you think about it. And so we're left in this position now where the partisan balance on the Supreme Court is way out of whack with what people have voted for. So what I'm really in favor of is returning the Supreme Court to being a sort of nonpartisan institution that is set away from the sort of fray of ideological politics. But we can't do that until we add some seats to correct the balance that we've lost, really.
I love it. You're smooth, I will say that. So
Thank
when
you.
you tweet,
I thought
pack
you
the
would.
court, quote, pack the court
Pack the
ought to
court.
be up there with abolish ICE. That is, in fact, a nonpartisan statement somehow. How does that work? How is that not? How is increasing the partisan Democratic representation on the court indeed nonpartisan?
Well, you know, when you encounter a jewel thief, you must steal things back, Tucker, as I'm sure you know. And look, I would love a sort of settlement once this is all done. I would love to get to a place, for example, where, you know, maybe every president gets 2 or 3 guaranteed Supreme Court nominations. You know, maybe we should have an even-numbered Supreme Court. You know, 10 justices, 5 from each party. I think that would be nice. It would require a little court packing, but you know, that's the art of the deal. But the reality is we're way out of whack. And if we're to have any hope of moving forward with a Supreme Court that's not this kind of ideological partisan institution, we have a little mending fences to do. So let's do it.
So, right. So in other words, increase the power of the left and everything will be cool. But as long as it's center right in the court, I think by anybody's, I mean, look, if you match public opinion polling to the issues, you will see that the court is not way out to the right at all. And I've seen it.
Oh, come
it's
on.
Not. It's pretty much right in the
Tucker,
center.
you don't believe that.
It's not. On the issues, it is not.
Well, so
I do believe it, actually,
well, so
because I know what the numbers are.
I know you don't believe that, and I know you shouldn't, right? So, for example,
true.
I don't think either of us believe that the way that Citizens United should come out should be subject to a public opinion poll, even though you know as well as I do that 75%
I'm not
of people
suggesting
don't approve
any
of
of the
That's not how
decisions ought to be
law should-
subject to
but that's
public
not how
opinion.
law
No,
should
I'm
work,
not-
right? You would agree with that.
No, but you yourself, no, but you're making the counter case. It's hard. You're claiming that we need to pack the court, which a naked power grab by the left, we both know it, but you're saying we need to do that because it will be more representative of the public will. And I'm merely noting as a factual matter, because I've seen the numbers, that the majority of recent Supreme Court decisions fall within the center line of public opinion. So actually there isn't a problem other than Democrats don't get to do their will with the court to the extent you wish they could.
Well, I'm not so sure about that. Look, I've tried to learn well from the most accomplished politicians of my age. And to my mind, the best one is Mitch McConnell. And he understood as well as I do that control of the Supreme Court is, to paraphrase Rod Blagojevich, not something you just give away, right? He sort of court shrunk for a year and a half to 8 members until there was a president to his liking. And remember, before the 2016 election, Ted Cruz and John McCain and all your beloved heroes, Tucker, Tucker, were saying maybe they should hold the seat open while Hillary Clinton was president. What I'm saying is that sort of power politics has to swing both ways, and then we have to end it. That's the view. So actually, it's not about
okay, right.
that at all.
So you're saying that once we, and by the way, just for the record, I hated that. I hated that they did that. Not because I wanted some leftover in the court, but because I thought it was power politics. I said that at the time. I don't like Merrick Garland was a leftist posing as a centrist, but I still was against not considering him. However, what you're saying is that
what
was
should we do
wrong.
about it?
Let's do it 20-fold. No, we should not delegitimize the court in the eyes of the public by packing it with lefties from Harvard.
Okay, how about
very
this?
cynical.
I'm a reasonable
That's more cynical than I am.
How about this?
I'm sorry, we're totally out of time. Yeah, give me one sentence.
Okay. Socialism will win. Thanks for having me.
Ian Samuel, thanks for revealing yourself. I appreciate it. From the border to any restaurant that a cabinet member dares to eat, America seems to be in the grip of a political crisis. Britt Hume will weigh in on that next. Animal will make people flee the Democrats. Waters of Los Angeles has been cheering on the harassment of Trump administration cabinet members. Today, the president struck back by tweeting this, quote, crazy Maxine Waters, said by some to be the most corrupt person in politics, rapidly becoming, together with Nancy Pelosi, the face of the Democrat Party. Her ranting and raving, even referring to herself as a wounded animal, will make people flee the Democrats! Exclamation point. Is that true? Fox chief political analyst Britt Hume joins us tonight. Britt, it does seem like there is a realignment going on the left. Something momentous is happening in the Democratic Party. What do you think it is?
Well, the Democratic Party has been moving left for a long time, and it is being tugged to go that way even more at the moment by some of the developments within the party. The sheer force of the never-Trump, anti-Trump movement in the Democratic Party has had that effect. It is all systems are go for doing everything you can to resist Trump. Maxine Waters is a voice in that. And that is where we are. And of course, you had the election in New York City last week of a out-and-out socialist with lots of radical ideas that found favor among those constituents. She will be a voice in the party. She's an attractive young candidate, very well spoken. She has a good story to tell. So these people are a factor in the life of the Democratic Party as we are seeing it today, Tucker.
So the argument against Trump that Democrats are trying to make is he's scary and radical. Now the Republicans, if they're smart, by no means a foregone conclusion, but let's say they are, they could say, yeah, maybe Trump's radical. But he doesn't want to abolish ICE or abolish borders or abolish profits or abolish the family. You're even scarier.
Yeah, well,
can they do that? Can Republicans flip it around?
Well, that's exactly what Mr. Trump's tweet represented, and it was pretty straightforward in the words of the tweet itself. You know, he was saying that Maxine Waters and Nancy Pelosi, two of the most controversial and, if the polls are correct, unpopular figures within the Democratic Party, are now the face of that party. That's pretty, that's pretty straightforward hardball politics. But that's what you do. You try to associate a party with its most unattractive, politically unattractive elements. That's what he's trying to do there. And he's got some ammunition to work with now, courtesy of the party itself and some of its leading members.
So I don't agree with Chuck Schumer's politics, but I think of Schumer as definitely a smart person. I don't think he's a radical. He's not a radical, personally. Why wouldn't Chuck Schumer call over to Nancy Pelosi or call over to the congressman who's going to represent the 14th district after the election and say, cool it down a little bit?
Well,
yeah, why wouldn't he do that? Apparently not.
Well, he did express his disagreement with Maxine Waters in her advocating the continuing harassment of Trump officials in public places. I'm sure he's a seasoned politician, and I'm sure he's uncomfortable with this. But remember, this is the party in which he has to live and operate. And he's got to find a way to accommodate the huge and energetic element within the Democratic Party who are bent on the destruction of the Trump presidency with trying to do some responsible politics that won't alienate all of the rest of the country. So that's not an easy job. I think he's got a tough job ahead of him.
I mean, can you imagine a day where conservatives, maybe a year from now, are pining for the Chuck Schumer era. If only we had reasonable statesmen like Chuck Schumer. I mean, it seems like things are accelerating to the point where we might want Chuck Schumer to have more power than he has.
Well, maybe, but I mean, a lot of this has to look. If the Democrats continue to pursue the agenda of its most left elements, they're going to have trouble at the ballot box. And it isn't going to matter particularly whether Chuck Schumer remains in the leadership or somebody else, because, you know, this hoped for blue wave that the Democrats were confidently predicting only a few months ago may very well not materialize. The Republicans could continue to have control of both houses as well as the White House, and the Democrats will be in the desert, as they to some extent are now. And that's really what's at stake here.
I predict that abolish ICE is not a winning campaign slogan.
No, of course it's not. It's a crazy idea. It's a crazy idea, but you got enough people saying it within the party that are people that have to be reckoned with, that it's going to be pretty hard for them to shed that label that comes out of that.
It's amazing. It's unbelievable. Brit Hume, thank you. Great to see you.
Bet. Yeah, you too, Tucker.
Standards are declining, sadly, across this country at a pretty brisk pace. Some people are not willing to play according to rigged rules. One student of Indian descent pretended to be African American in order to get into medical school. He joins us next to explain why he did that. Stay tuned. It was reported today that the Trump administration will be revoking Obama-era legal guidelines in which the federal government encourages college to use race as a factor in admissions, as if they needed encouragement. If that's the case, it'll be a long-awaited blow in favor of equality and civil rights and standards in American life. In more and more parts of our life in this country, critical decisions are being made simply on people's appearance, on their race or gender, instead of on actual measures of achievement or merit, and that's terrifying. Obviously, one of the places where merit is most critical is in medicine. We trust physicians to make life or death decisions. They do every day. Competence is critical there, obviously. But medical schools don't see it that way. When applying to medical school, two critical factors are an applicant's GPA and the score on the medical college admissions test, the MCAT. It goes without saying that a prospective doctor ought to have excellent grades and a high MCAT score. You'd want that for your doctor. But the standard is not the same for everybody. It differs by appearance. For example, applicants with an MCAT of 27 to 29 and a GPA of 3.4 to 3.59, if you have those numbers and you're Asian, you have a 21% chance of getting into a medical school. If you're white, you have a 29% chance of getting in with those numbers. But if you're Hispanic, you have a 60% chance of getting in. African American applicants had an 81% acceptance rate with those numbers. In other words, with identical scores, an African American applicant was 4 times as likely to be admitted as an Asian purely because of appearance. Vijay Chokal Ingam knows more than most people about the dark underbelly of medical school admissions. He is of Indian heritage, but he wanted to go to medical school. So he shaved his head and started going by his middle name, which is Jojo. He presented himself as African American. He says it made all the difference and got him into medical school. He has written a book on this experience. It's called Almost Black. We spoke to him recently. Here's part of the conversation. Vijay, thank you very much for joining us tonight. So you are convinced, based on your experience, that your race, or what the medical school perceived your race to be, was critical in getting in?
So exactly like you mentioned, I reviewed the statistical data published by the American Association of Medical Colleges. I figured out that I was much more likely to get into admission as an an African American there's an Asian American. So I came up with that scam that you described earlier. I managed to get into Washington University, get waitlisted at Washington University and the University of Pennsylvania, which are the third and fourth best medical schools in the country at the time. And I managed to get into St. Louis University School of Medicine, despite the fact that my 3.1 GPA was dramatically lower than their average of 3.7. So my plan paid off much more than I expected.
What does it say about the people who run medical schools that they'd be willing to lower standards for physicians, many of whom, wield scalpels for a living, cut people open, in the name of some abstract diversity goal? That seems reckless.
So as a result of this system, they essentially allow students who are not as qualified as others to get in. Now, I don't want to talk about the end product, whether this results in physicians who are of lower quality, but I will say that it is a system of legalized racism. The universities are promoting, and medical schools are promoting, discrimination against Asian Americans on a massive scale. And it also promotes negative stereotypes about the competency and professionalism of African American physicians and healthcare professionals. It's important to realize that there was a University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign study which showed that affirmative action actually promoted negative stereotypes about African Americans and Hispanic students. So that is a very real concern.
Oh, of course it is. Is there some reason that we should care about what our doctors look like? Is appearance critical to practicing medicine?
So, first of all, I never graduated medical school, so I can't say that is. But ultimately, we want to live in a society where you judge someone based on merit. Your race should not be relevant to your ability to practice medicine or anything effectively. That's not the type of society which we want to promote, necessarily.
Yes. Well, I'm sure you've taken criticism for this. I think you're a hero for doing it, and I would love to hear your critics explain exactly what you did wrong, because they can't. Thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. Well, you probably heard liberals say they are woked and say that's a good thing. The phrase is not grammatical, obviously. But what does it actually mean? How do you get woke? Who's the wokest? Liberal Sherpa Kathy Aru joins us next with her explanation. We'll be right back. Well, tomorrow at their vegan cookouts or die-ins or whatever else the left does on July 4th rather than celebrate America, activists will be asking one another the single most important question of the moment. Are you woke? If so, how woke are you? They're not asking about your level of alertness, at least doesn't seem that way. There's something more going on. Stay woke is the new watchword across the progressive left. What does it mean? We have questions like this. There's one person we go to, Kathy Aru, founding publisher of Catalina Magazine and our liberal Sherpa. She joins us tonight. Kathy, What is woke? And are you woke?
I'm woke. You're woke. Yeah, we know what's happening. We are not distracted. We know what is important with what's happening today. So we are aware. We are enlightened. We are woke. We are not busy with things that don't matter. We know what matters. We know what's going to happen. We know what the future is important, what it's about. So we're woke. We have to stay woke.
Both? Wait, we're both woke. You and I are both woke.
I think you're woke.
Who's the woker of the two, would you say? You or me?
Well, of course you. It's your show. You are the woker. You're the wokest.
Really? Because I think of myself as more like comatose, the opposite of woke.
No, you're
kind
the wokest.
Like
the wokest.
Sedated. Yeah. Okay, the wokest.
No, I would never
but
say
I
that
thought
about
there
you.
was a political connotation to wokeness.
Well, yeah. I mean,
and you had to kind of be on the progressive left to be fully woke.
Well, it's almost as if, let's just say, give an example when people are talking about the wall and building a wall with Mexico. And perhaps the left would say the wall is not that important because immigration was a real problem in 2007. You're not woke, stay woke. That's so 2007. Are you asleep? Stay woke.
Okay, so the woke position would be build the wall, make America great again. That's the woke.
No, that's a distraction. The wall is not needed. Immigration was a much bigger problem in 2007. It is not a big problem today. So that is a distraction. No, the conditions that people are living under in the United States and the detention centers, that's a real problem. So stay woke, stay focused. Keep thinking about what really matters, not on these things that don't matter. Who decides?
Right. Who decides, though? Because there are some subjective elements to this scheme you're describing. I mean, somebody's going to have to decide what's woke and what's not. Is there a woke council?
A woke council would be reality. Reality decides. So if you think
reality decides. It's settled science. Okay.
Right. On the street corner, if there's a nice policeman giving a lollipop and everyone says all policemen are so sweet, someone from the Black Lives Matter movement might say, but there have been issues with the police. Stay woke. So
what if you had a child, what if you had a child who didn't, for example, hate the police enough or wasn't enthusiastic enough about illegal immigration? Your kid was not woke. What would you do with an unwoke child?
Well, children should keep their adolescence and childhood and happiness for as long as possible. But if they read Alice in Wonderland, they would be exposed to this concept of don't fall asleep, don't fall down that rabbit hole, stay focused. Be woke. That's where it came from. Really, the 1800s was the concept of don't be asleep, don't accept an ignorance is bliss. Face the facts.
So the
face
Victorians,
reality.
You're saying, were highly woke.
They almost created the term. They almost created this term to be woke. Yeah, and then came in the 90s.
It's so funny because when you think of the Victorian era, you think really more of sexual repression and ankle-length dresses.
Sleepers and
you don't really think of Black Lives Matter.
Well, luckily, a lot was learned from that era, so we don't have chimney sweepers today because people were able to get woke and change, and that's how things happened. People woke up.
Do you think, and
just
this is slightly off topic, but it's related, is there a kind of dreamlike LSD-infused quality to modern progressivism, or is that just my imagination?
This whole concept is to stay woke, is to not fall asleep at the wheel, is to not be in la-la land. So to not distract, as maybe a President Trump would distract with the wall, you're telling people, stay woke. That's not the issue.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow. It's the sound of one hand clapping. You can
LSD,
sleep while woke.
LSD.
It's amazing. Kathy, thank you.
You're welcome. Stay woke.
No 4th of July barbecue is complete without an extra helping of the Liberal Sherpa. Don't miss tomorrow's special Liberal Sherpa edition of this program, a full hour, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern. Up next, an amazing story. A youth soccer team in peril in Thailand, trapped in a flooded cave. How did that happen? How can they be rescued? Do they have hope? We have an expert on cave rescues next.